Well, it is now early summer, but there are still a few things, spring blooming things at the clearing. And we'll start with this one. This is probably the most common deciduous shrub in Door County. This is round-leaf dogwood, one of, I can't decide for sure if there are 4 or 5 native species of dogwood in Door County. This is the most common one, just kind of finishing blooming now, dropping its stamens. But like most dogwoods, a pretty good sized cluster of small white flowers that end up producing a small fruit. It's a fleshy fruit with a single seed inside, and those are botanically called drupes, D-R-U-P-E-S, a single-seeded fleshy fruit. And in some dogwoods, that fruit ends up being red, and some it ends up being white, and then some it ends up being blue. On round-leaf dogwood, it ends up being white that's kind of light blue background, so bluish white, that the birds will devour immediately in late summer, early fall when they ripen. Birds go crazy for any dogwood fruit, eat those right away. It's called round-leaf dogwood because it has a much wider or rounder leaf than any of the other dogwoods. And it has the classic dogwood leaf veination, these parallel veins that when they get to the edge of the leaf or the margin, they curl up and don't quite make it to the end. Like all dogwoods, fall color is very nice, kind of a maroon, red. It gets to be kind of a tall, leggy plant, so it's not a real popular landscape plant in a suburban area because they get pretty leggy. Within the genus of dogwoods, there are some subgroups, and a close relative of roundleaf dogwood is red osier or red twig dogwood, and they have that nice bright red stem in the winter. These are colorful too, but kind of a pink, light pink, not as colorful as a red osier dogwood, and these get much taller. So not a great landscape plant in many applications, but a very common wild plant in Door County, especially along edges and in ditches and fence rows, brownleaf dogwood. Right next to the roundleaf dogwood, and we're, by the way, on the road that goes down to the forge and the workshop. This is buffalo berry or russet buffalo berry. Russeting, it refers to the rough texture on the bottom, or russeted texture on the bottom side of the leaf. It's long done blooming, blooms in very early spring, just as the leaves come out. And it is already in fruit. They look like honeysuckle fruits. They're not. This is a good guy. Honeysuckle usually is a bad guy. But they're bright red and ripe already. Here it is, only late June, and this already has a ripe fruit. And they'll disappear quickly. The birds will take these. These may not be here next week already. So it's one of the first plants to produce a ripe fruit that birds and squirrels and chipmunks eat. And only the females get these fruits. This is a nice example, or a good example, of a dioecious plant. Dioecious is Latin for two house, separate male and female plants, like hollies and bittersweet and buffalo berry. So only the females get the fruits. I've always liked it as a landscape plant, kind of in suburbia. It wouldn't be that popular. It kind of gets big and rangy. The branches kind of flop over to the ground eventually, like you can see wants to happen here. So it's not a really neat looking plant for a fussier landscape, but as a native plant for wilder landscapes and natural areas, it's great, and especially because it's so great for birds. One of the first things to produce a fruit for songbirds, buffalo berry or russet buffalo berry. One thing I like pointing out in spring and early summer regarding deciduous trees and shrubs is how much color there can be in the emerging leaves before the chlorophyll develops in those leaves. Here we have ironwood with this great color on those young leaves, and right above it we have a white ash, which of course doesn't have a very rosy future with emerald ash borer. Well, look at the nice color on those leaves. So we're used to thinking about fall color on deciduous tree and shrub leaves, but there's often a lot of spring color too, like you see right here on the ironwood and the white ash. This is a late spring, early summer blooming herbaceous plant with a bad name. It's called thimbleweed. It's a native plant. It's one of our native anemones, but anything with the word weed in it people think is awful. But this is actually a great wildflower for not the deep woods, but kind of open shade like this. It's an anemone. Anemones are also called wind flowers. They're pollinated by the wind, not by insects, so they don't have any nectar. You won't see insects on anemones like thimbleweed. And these eventually, it gets its name from the seed structure that eventually forms from these flowers. Looks like a thimble, hence the name thimbleweed. They should come up with a better name than thimbleweed, but I haven't heard it. So here's another shrub like buffalo berry that fruits early. This is leatherwood, the one that gets a name because you can practically tie the stems into a knot and they won't break. But it also fruits early, but they're not as showy or noticeable as on buffalo berry. They're underneath, kind of pear-shaped. It'll end up being kind of a yellowish green color. They ripen early, by late June usually, so the birds will take these quickly too. But again, you wouldn't notice it because you can't see them now. But it's, along with buffalo berry, one of those early season plants that in the early season already have a mature fruit for birds, leatherwood. Well, here's something in full bloom, a shrub called dwarf bush honeysuckle. It's in the same family as honeysuckles, but a different genus, a native plant. People hear the word honeysuckle and they panic sometimes, so this is a great one. This is about as tall as it gets, maybe 3 feet, 3.5 feet. Suckers up and forms these little clusters or groves, and blooms in late spring, early summer with these not terribly showy, but they're right out front, so they're noticeable, nice yellow. And they'll form a little seed capsule later, not showy, kind of a dry brown seed capsule, not a colorful fruit like honeysuckles. And you can see the bumblebees going crazy for it here. So it's a good pollinator. And it's often used, or sometimes used, as a tall ground cover. Ground covers don't have to be real short. They can be taller sometimes and cover a lot of area. The fall color can often be a nice maroon or purplish maroon, so a nice seasonal fall color. So really a great plant, not very well known, a native in Door County. You often see it closer to the Niagara Escarpment on that thinner soil, where it'll only get half this height. Won't get 3 feet tall, maybe get 1 to 2 feet tall down there where it's so much drier. And I can see that the deer have been sampling this. And they didn't probably like it very much because they didn't eat very much of it. Anyway, dwarf bush honeysuckle. Well, this is one of those I always tell people the clearing's beautiful every week of the year, but there are a couple of weeks where it's especially beautiful. This is one of them. When the coreopsis are in bloom in the Homestead Meadow, also in the meadow as you leave the property over by Garrett Bay Road. But this is lance-leaf coreopsis, a late spring, early summer bloomer with these bright yellow flowers that just kind of light up this time of year. and they combine with a plant that's not native here. I wouldn't consider it invasive. It's kind of just one of those garden weeds that I pull from my landscape, but here we just let it go. But oxeye daisy combines very nicely with the lance-leaf coreopsis. So this is one of those prairie type plants. We don't have true prairies in northern Door County, but there were some areas even before settlement where some of those kinds of plants grew. Shorelines. There are some areas where the topsoil is so thin that it doesn't support large trees, just stunted trees. So things like black-eyed Susan and lance-leaf coreopsis and bee balm, a little blue stem grass in some places. Some of those prairie-type plants were native up here originally, and now that we have more open areas where the trees aren't growing anymore, we have more of this in some places. And the clearing is kind of famous for its meadows with the lance-leaf coreopsis.